Many Muslim parents do what they can to teach Islam, and their child is still growing distant from it. They learn the rules, they know what's right and wrong, but as they grow older, the connection just isn't there. So why does this happen? Now, this is something that a lot of parents silently struggle with because it's not typically due to a lack of effort, right? Parents are trying. They're sending their kids to classes, teaching them at home, making sure they're exposed to Islamic knowledge. There is real concern, real intention, and real care behind it. And the children themselves, no, they're not completely disconnected from the religion. They know some things, they've learned the very basics, they can tell you what's right and wrong, but even with all that, something still feels like it's missing. And over time, that gap becomes noticeable. So the question isn't simply whether children are learning Islam or not, right? The question is, why do some children grow up knowing Islam, but not really feeling connected to it? Because once we understand that, we can start to approach the issue in a more thoughtful and effective way. Now, Islam is not just something to be taught. It's something that needs to be felt and understood. But in many cases, Islam does tend to be taught mainly as a list of rules. Say Bismillah before you eat, don't eat with your left hand, pray, don't miss it, eat halal, make sure there's no gelatin, right? And of course those things matter, of course. But when that's the main way a child experiences the entire religion, something is bound to go missing. There's not enough focus on meaning, on why we do these things, on building a sense of love for Allah, not just obligation. So a child learns what to do, but not always how to feel about it. And then there's pressure without understanding. A child's told to pray, but doesn't really understand what they're saying. They aren't taught, for example, that salah, right, means connection, and that when they're praying, they're really in a type of meeting with their creator. And it's like they're standing in audience with him, right? And when they recite the Quran in their prayers, it's really like Allah's revelation is speaking to them. Now, this simple, slight adjustment in framing can make a world of difference, especially when it's done early. Or, they're told that something is haram, but don't really grasp why it matters, right? Like, who's the one who made it haram in the first place? What's the consequence for knowingly indulging in something haram? Again, this type of framing takes seconds, and it's super easy to understand, but it can deepen a child's understanding and connection to Islam immeasurably. But, without all that, they still follow, especially when they're young. They still go along with it, they still listen, they still comply. But over time, if that understanding and connection isn't built, it doesn't always become something internal. It stays external, ungrounded. The roots don't really take hold. So later on, when that structure isn't being enforced in the same way, because it can't, they don't stay compliant kids forever, the practice can start to drop. Not because the child rejected Islam outright, but because it was never fully internalized to begin with. And this is what many people simply don't realize. Children don't disconnect suddenly. It happens slowly over time. In the Islamic tradition, this is why there's such an emphasis on tarbiyah, right? Not just teaching, but nurturing. The very word tarbiyah comes from the Arabic word rabb, which, as most of us will know, means Lord in English, but it conveys meanings of growth, care, and guidance. And of course, like I said, we know that rabb is one of the names that we call Allah himself. It emphasizes nurturing, sustaining, raising something to its full potential. So when scholars talk about tarbiyah, they aren't just talking about giving instructions. They're talking about shaping, guiding, and helping a child's character and heart grow over time. Because raising a child in Islam isn't only about, passing on information. It's about gradually shaping the heart of the individual, the understanding, the relationship a child has with their religion. And a big part of that is maintaining a balance. There's a place for discipline, teaching what's right and wrong, setting boundaries, building structure. But alongside that, there also has to be understanding, helping a child see meaning, helping them develop a sense of love, purpose, and connection. Scholars have also pointed to the importance of a child's environment and emotional development. What a child sees daily, how Islam is spoken about at home, the tone, the consistency, the example around them. All of that plays a role in how the religion settles in their heart. And importantly, this process is gradual. Okay? Internalizing Islam doesn't happen all at once. It develops over time through repetition, experience, and consistent exposure. And of course, that's one of the things I consistently preach on this channel is consistency. So, the goal is not that a child merely follows Islam early on, but that over time it becomes something that they understand, they value, and they carry within themselves. And this connects to something important about how children develop. At an early stage, Children don't fully understand everything, obviously, right? They imitate. They just, follow what they see. They copy what they're told. They go along with the environment around them. And that's not a problem. That's just how human learning begins, right? But what happens during this stage is what really matters. Because if Islam is mostly experienced as pressure, right? Constant correction, constant instruction, constant don't do this, don't do that, then over time, a kind of resistance can start to build. Not always openly, sometimes it's subtle, not even at the conscious level, right? But the child begins to associate their religion with heaviness, with being told off, with something they're pushed into. On the other hand, if Islam is experienced as something meaningful, something that makes sense, something that's spoken about with warmth, something that feels connected to their own life, then a different response develops. The child starts to feel drawn to it. They begin to internalize it. They begin to want it. And that's the key difference. Because early on, children may all behave similarly, but over time, what they felt about Islam is what really starts to show. So what can parents actually do about this? Right? Start by explaining the why behind things. This is super important. Not every detail, but enough for a child to feel that what they're doing has meaning, that it really has a point, that it's not just rules, but something purposeful. Like the example I mentioned earlier about Salah. Second, focus on building love for Allah early. Speak about Allah in a way that a child can connect to. His mercy, His care, His presence in their life. What it truly means for them to take Him not just as their Lord, but as their Rabb. Right? Let that relationship grow alongside the actions. Also, try your best, right, to avoid teaching Islam only as rules. Rules matter, of course, but they shouldn't be the whole picture. There should also be understanding, reflection, right, and that sense of connection. And finally, create positive associations with Islam, moments that feel calm, meaningful, even enjoyable, so that the child doesn't just do Islam, but begins to feel good about it. And these don't have to be big changes. Small, right, consistent shifts in how things are explained and experienced. This can make a real difference over time, right? The key thing to understand is this. Teaching Islam is not just about giving information. It's about building a connection. And when that connection is strong, it stays with a person even as they grow older. And when that connection is strong, it stays with a person, especially as they grow older. Now, if this gave you a new perspective, consider subscribing, because on this channel, I break down real challenges Muslims face so we can approach our faith with clarity and understanding.